Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at another disturbing case with you. On April 18th and 19th, 2020, Gabriel Wortman went on a deadly rampage across Nova Scotia, leaving a trail of heartbreak and destruction in his wake. Over the course of 13 hours, Wortman, disguised in a fake police uniform and driving a replica RCMP cruiser, attacked 16 different locations, killing 22 people and injuring 3 others. The tragedy ended when he was shot by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, in Enfield. In the aftermath, questions arose regarding why the police didn't use the Alert Ready system to warn the public, and why previous reports of Wortman's violent behavior were seemingly ignored. An inquiry was launched to investigate the police response, as families and communities struggled to make sense of the senseless violence that had completely destroyed their lives. The Nova Scotia attacks stand as the deadliest shooting spree in Canadian history, surpassing the tragic 1989 École Polytechnique massacre in Montreal. Our love and respect goes out to all those who knew and loved the victims and all those affected by this case. The horrifying events began in the quiet beachside community of Portapique, where Wortman attacked his partner, set their cottage on fire, and forcefully put her in his replica RCMP cruiser. Miraculously, his partner managed to escape and hide in the woods until morning. But Wortman was just getting started. From 10:01 p.m., Portapique residents began calling 911 to report gunshots and several fires. The first call came from the wife of a victim who was shot and killed while trying to protect her 2 sons by barricading them in a bedroom. Wortman tried to set the house on fire, but the boys managed to escape. It is believed Wortman targeted the father first as he was afraid he could stop him since he had rifles. Around 10:05 p.m., Wortman returned to his burning house and killed a neighbor who had mistaken him for an RCMP officer responding to the fire. Her children took in the 2 boys from the first house, and together they hid for hours, staying on the phone with 911 until they were rescued. At 10:10 p.m., 2 of Wortman's neighbors drove to his house to check the fire while calling 911. They passed a house where Wortman had killed another couple, noticing what seemed to be a police car with its lights off. After confirming Wortman's house was on fire, they saw the same car setting another house on fire. When they pulled alongside, Wortman fired at them and hit the driver in the shoulder, and the 2 neighbors fled the scene. When the first 3 RCMP officers arrived on the scene at 10:26 p.m., they walked through the neighborhood and soon found some of the victims. Many had died while trying to escape the flames or help others. The police, overwhelmed by the scene, reported that they couldn't locate the shooter and described the situation as horrendous. They soon found the neighbors Wortman had shot, who identified him and mentioned he was heading towards the beach in a replica police vehicle, a detail also confirmed by multiple 911 calls. At 11:32 p.m., the RCMP tweeted about a firearms complaint, urging Portapique residents to stay inside and lock their doors. They set up a 2-kilometer search perimeter, but Wortman had already left the area at around 10:45 p.m., driving through a dirt road by a blueberry field that wasn't blocked off. He spent the night parked behind a welding shop in Debert, about 26 kilometers east of Portapique, where he left police equipment and gun-related items. Despite the chaos, residents reported seeing little to no law enforcement presence at first, even as they called 911 to report ongoing fires and gunshots. By 1 a.m., the RCMP had passed around messages to police agencies across Nova Scotia, identifying Wortman as a suspect, armed and dangerous, and associated with an old white police car. At 5:43 a.m., Wortman left Debert and drove north on Highway 4 to a house on Hunter Road in Wentworth, arriving around 6:30 a.m. He killed the 2 residents and their dogs and stayed at the house for about 3 hours. Around that time, police found Wortman's partner in Portapique. She had fled to a neighbor's house to call 911 after Wortman smashed her phone. Barefoot and having hidden outdoors for much of the night, She confirmed he was pretending to be a police officer and provided a photo of his replica police vehicle. A bolo alert with this information was issued at 8 a.m., warning that Wortman could be anywhere in Nova Scotia. The RCMP publicly announced they were dealing with an active shooter in Portapique at 8:02 a.m., and Wortman was officially identified as the suspect at 8:54 a.m. Wortman eventually set the house he was in on fire. As he left, he killed a neighbor who saw the fire and tried to help. At 9:23 a.m., he began driving south on Highway 4 toward Portapique, and at 9:35 a.m., he killed another victim walking along the road in Wentworth Valley. Around 9:45 a.m., Wortman arrived at another house in Glenholm, but the residents, recognizing him, refused to let him in. One resident armed himself with a shotgun to catch Wortman. Trying to trick them, Wortman pretended to be a police officer, but the resident called the police, causing Wortman to leave. By 9:48 a.m., he was seen near a campground in Glenholm. Before 10 a.m. in Deborah, Wortman stopped random cars a few hundred meters apart and killed the drivers and passengers of both vehicles. He was seen passing through Deborah and Onslow by 10:08 a.m. At 10:17 a.m., the RCMP warned the public for the first time via Twitter that Wortman was pretending to be a police officer and shared a photo of his vehicle. At the Onslow Belmont Fire Hall, which had been set up as a shelter for victims from Portapique, 2 RCMP officers accidentally opened fire on an emergency management officer, thinking he was Wortman. They missed and continued their search without checking on the people at the fire hall. Wortman was caught on surveillance video passing through Truro around 10:20 a.m., and at 10:25 a.m., he stopped briefly at Millbrook First Nation to change his jacket for a reflective vest. Before 10:49 a.m., Wortman encountered RCMP officer Chad Morrison at the intersection of Route 2 and Route 224 in Shubenacadie. Wortman shot into Morrison's cruiser and injured him. Morrison managed to escape and hide at an empty paramedic station, where he was later found and taken to the hospital. Wortman then drove less than 500 meters south to the junction with Route 224, where he collided head-on with RCMP officer Heidi Stevenson, who was driving north to meet Morrison. In the confrontation, Wortman shot and killed Stevenson. He then stole her sidearm and ammunition and set both vehicles on fire. Wortman also shot and killed a nearby motorist who had stopped to help Stevenson and drove off in the victim's silver Ford Escape SUV. Police announced the vehicle change at 11:06 a.m. Shortly after, Wortman killed a woman he knew at her Shubenacadie home, changed his clothes again, and stole her Mazda 3 vehicle. By 11:24 a.m., he was seen continuing south along Highway 102 through Milford. After over 13 hours of pursuit, Wortman stopped to refuel at the Irving Big Stop service area in Enfield, 92 kilometers south of Portapique and 40 kilometers north of Halifax. At 11:26 a.m., 2 RCMP officers arrived. One officer drew his firearm as he left the vehicle, aiming at Wortman inside the car. Wortman raised Stevenson's sidearm to his head and fired, and the officers then fatally shot him. His death was confirmed by police at 11:40 a.m. According to a partially redacted document, Wortman's partner said he had been on his way to Halifax to get someone before he was killed, which led the officers to catch him. Wortman killed 22 people, including police officer Heidi Stevenson. Police officer Chad Morrison, whom Wortman also shot, survived, as did the man in Portapique who first reported Wortman's use of a police car. 13 of the dead were found in Portapique, 4 in Wentworth, 2 in Deborah, and 3 in Shubenacadie. 8 victims were found in the remains of structure fires. Wortman also killed 2 dogs and injured 2 others. According to RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucky, some of Wortman's first victims were closely connected to him, but over time, his attacks became more random. One of the victims in Wentworth had previously gone hunting with Wortman, while another victim had a property in Portapique at which Wortman and his uncle had a fight. 51-year-old Gabriel Wortman was a denturist who operated 2 clinics in Halifax and Dartmouth and owned real estate in Halifax, Dartmouth, and Portapique. His estate, valued at 2.1 million Canadian dollars, included 6 properties and 3 corporations. Wortman usually lived above his Dartmouth clinic, but also had a cottage in Portapique since 2004. He had a close friendship and business association with a former Fredericton lawyer who died in November 2009, which left him all his possessions, including one of the rifles used in the attacks. Wortman did not have a possession and acquisition license, which would have been required to legally possess the rifle. After the attacks, complaints from the public led to the removal of the decorative signs on Wortman's denture clinic on Portland Street in Dartmouth, which showed a large smile and a set of dentures. Halifax Regional Police took down the signs, and the building was destroyed in January 2022. Wortman had a previous conviction for assault in 2002, which resulted in 9 months of probation, during which he was prohibited from possessing weapons and ordered to undergo anger management counseling. He was also involved in 2 civil lawsuits over property disputes. In 2004, Wortman offered to help a friend in financial trouble who was about to lose his house, but he then anonymously took ownership of the house, evicted the man, and sold the property. In 2015, Wortman's uncle lent him a house in Portapique while selling his Edmonton condominium. Wortman refused to return the property, claiming he was owed money. The uncle eventually sold it, and one of the buyers later became a victim in the killings. Witnesses described Gabriel Wortman as paranoid, manipulative, and controlling. According to his uncle, Wortman and his mother suffered abuse from his father, who was known for being a chronic petty thief able to manipulate the system to avoid financial obligations, a trait Wortman may have learned from him. A cousin described Wortman as almost a career criminal who engaged in various illegal activities without getting caught. Neighbors noted Wortman's obsession with his partner and his jealousy. Residents reported suspicions that Wortman was stacking gasoline and propane tanks, and he allegedly boasted about having lime and muriatic acid to dispose of bodies. Neighbors also mentioned his struggles with alcohol and how his denturist business was affected by the pandemic, which was the reason for the shutdown of non-essential services in Nova Scotia. According to his partner, Wortman had been consumed by fear and anxiety about the pandemic for weeks before the attacks. He believed he was going to die and expressed concerns that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau would take control of money, which led him to make large withdrawals from his bank accounts. But there's a twist in his story. According to his yearbook, Gabriel Wortman actually wanted to be a police officer, but his partner revealed to police after the attacks that Wortman started hating them and believed he was better than them. Despite this, he had a hobby of collecting police souvenirs and restoring old police cruisers. At the time of the attacks, he owned 4 such cruisers, 2 of which were found burned at his Portapique property, another at his Halifax property, and he initially used the 4th during the rampage. One person described Wortman's home as a shrine dedicated to the RCMP, and he kept 2 of the vehicles behind his dental clinic. In 2017 or 2018, Wortman approached a businessman in Dieppe about buying a decommissioned RCMP cruiser, claiming to be a retired officer wanting to use it to deceive thieves by parking it outside his home. He didn't proceed with the purchase due to its cost. Witnesses also reported that Wortman had a tendency to dress in a police uniform and role play. Despite his fascination with law enforcement, police were called about Wortman's troubling behavior on multiple occasions. In 2001, he was reported to have assaulted a 15-year-old boy. In June 2010, Halifax Regional Police investigated Gabriel Wortman for threatening his parents, but no official action was taken as there wasn't enough evidence. In May 2011, Truro Police received a concerning email tip from an anonymous source about Wortman possessing guns and expressing a desire to harm a police officer. The tip also mentioned his stress and mental health issues, claiming he always kept a handgun nearby. This information was transferred to the Nova Scotia RCMP, though it's unclear what actions they took, and the tip was eventually purged from their records as per protocol. A former neighbor in Portapique reported Wortman to the RCMP in the summer of 2013 for allegedly assaulting his spouse and possessing illegal firearms. However, since the spouse did not file a complaint, the RCMP did not pursue further action. The neighbor eventually left Portapique due to Wortman's escalating aggression towards his spouse following the complaint. The RCMP confirmed they received the neighbor's report, but later purged the file from their records. No clear motive has been found for Gabriel Wortman's attacks. The investigation consisted of 25 units of the RCMP, with the Halifax Regional Police and the Canada Border Services Agency. The crime scenes spanned a distance of at least 50 kilometers, with 16 locations, including 5 structure fires and approximately 500 witnesses identified. A man whom Wortman had considered buying a police car from was warned by police during the incident that he might be a target. But Wortman did not target him during his rampage. The Nova Scotia RCMP Major Crime Unit established a tip hotline to get more information from the public about the attacks. On May 11th, the RCMP's Behavioral Analysis Unit began a psychological autopsy on Wortman and conducted extensive interviews with his friends, family, and associates. Their findings showed that Wortman was an injustice collector, a term in criminology describing people who have been through grief and injustices over many years. 5 firearms were recovered from the stolen vehicle Wortman used in Enfield. 4 of these firearms belonged to Wortman, 2 semi-automatic handguns and 2 semi-automatic rifles, one of which was described as a military-style assault rifle. The 5th firearm was police officer Heidi Stevenson's stolen service pistol. Gabriel Wortman's purchase and use of firearms in the Nova Scotia attacks were a very important point in the investigation. The Ruger Mini 14, bought legally from an estate in Canada, had been imported and purchased in Winnipeg before Wortman bought it. Canadian gun policy allows the executor of an estate temporary possession of firearms, including those like the Mini 14, which typically require a possession and acquisition license for legal ownership. Wortman had connections in Maine, where he stole the Glock 23 from a friend for what he claimed was personal protection. Another friend confirmed lending Wortman the Ruger P89 within the past few years. These firearms were classified as restricted in Canada. Additionally, Wortman had high-capacity magazines banned under Canadian law and equipped his pistols with laser sights. Wortman's use of a police car and uniform allowed him to not get caught for a while. While owning police vehicles or uniforms is legal in Canada, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense. Officials noted that Wortman bought the specific vehicle used in the attacks, a 2017 Ford Taurus, from an auction in fall 2019. It was repainted and police accessories were removed. Wortman was believed to have spent 9 months changing the police vehicle he used during the attacks. The decals used on the vehicle were bought from a supplier without the owner's permission. Financial transactions through PayPal were flagged as suspicious between March 22 and December 5, 2019, and revealed purchases of police gear both in Canada and the US. Additionally, records from the Canada Border Services Agency documented Wortman crossing the Canada-United States border via Woodstock, New Brunswick, 15 times within the previous 2 years, with his last return to Canada on March 6. In the weeks leading up to the attacks, Wortman liquidated his bank accounts and withdrew 475,000 Canadian dollars from Brinks. This raised questions and speculation about possible ties to organized crime and whether he may have been a confidential informant for the RCMP. However, the RCMP denied any prior association with Wortman and attributed his actions to paranoia fueled by fears about the pandemic potentially causing widespread collapse. Following the attacks, a fireproof safe with hundreds of thousands of dollars was discovered at Wortman's Portapique property, with a total of 705,000 Canadian dollars taken from the premises. On July 27th, court documents were made public, and police interviews with witnesses were revealed. These witnesses claimed that Wortman was involved in drug smuggling, alleging that he provided drugs sourced from Maine to residents of Portapique and the nearby community of Economy. They also said that Wortman had stockpiles of both firearms and drugs, hidden behind fake walls and hidden compartments in his house. One witness went as far as claiming that Wortman possessed 2 crates of grenades bought in the U.S. This allegation gained attention when a lawyer representing victims' families reported the discovery of wooden ammunition cases at a crime scene in Portapique, suggesting they could have been used to store grenades. In addition to drug smuggling and weapons allegations, witnesses also described Wortman and a friend traveling to the U.S. to smuggle cigarettes, alcohol, and potentially other illegal goods using a sailboat owned by the friend. In response to these revelations, a media coalition, including the Halifax Examiner, appealed to the court to unseal specific amendments to the search warrant documents related to the RCMP's investigation into the events of April 18th and 19th. The Nova Scotia judge ruled in favor of the media coalition and ordered these amendments to remain unedited. Following these developments, the RCMP issued a detailed statement refuting most of the claims made by witnesses. They claimed that the evidence supporting these allegations came from only a single source among the hundreds interviewed during the investigation. Firstly, Nova Scotia's Serious Incident Response Team announced its investigation into 2 separate incidents: the police shooting of Gabriel Wortman and another incident involving RCMP officers who discharged their weapons inside a fire hall in Onslow. This latter incident happened under the belief that they were catching Wortman, though he was not there at the time. By December 17th, SIRT completed its review specifically about Wortman's death, concluding that the actions of the officers involved in his shooting were justified. Following the tragic events involving Gabriel Wortman in Nova Scotia, there was a tremendous amount of skepticism and questions raised about the police response and the communication methods used to warn the public. Commissioner Brenda Luckie did a thorough review of the RCMP's response to the attacks. One of the most important points under review was the delay in informing the public about Wortman potentially impersonating a police officer, which could have impacted public safety and response efforts. A central issue that came out was the failure to use Alert Ready, Canada's emergency population warning system, to warn residents about the attacks. Instead, the RCMP decided to use social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook for updates. This decision raised concerns because the affected areas had poor cellular internet service, and many residents, particularly older people, may not have had access to or been familiar with social media platforms. Relatives of the victims and others argued that the use of Alert Ready could have potentially saved lives by reaching a bigger segment of the population more quickly and effectively. On July 28, 2020, Federal Public Safety Minister Bill Blair announced the establishment of a public inquiry into the April 2020 Nova Scotia mass murders as a result of the public outcry and pressure from victims' families. At first, there had been discussions about a joint review by federal and local authorities, but the scope was expanded to a full public inquiry after protests and concerns from the community. The independent public inquiry was established to examine the mass casualty incident in Nova Scotia and to find recommendations to increase community safety in the future. The inquiry's mandates included a thorough examination of the RCMP response to the incident and the role gender-based violence may have played in the events. Additionally, the Commission maintains an ongoing webcast to broadcast its public proceedings, making sure that they're transparent and keeping the public informed about the Commission's work. On March 30th, 2023, the Mass Casualty Commission released its final report, which was highly critical of the RCMP. The report highlighted several key failings, including the RCMP's inability to effectively warn the public about the shooting, inadequate preparation for such crises, systemic inflexibility, and a lack of accountability within the force. The report made 130 recommendations, more than half of which were directed at the RCMP. These included urging the federal public safety minister to initiate an independent review of the RCMP. Other important recommendations included better funding for addressing intimate partner violence, recognizing the role of such violence in the lead-up to the attacks, and calling for increased resources and support in this area. It also suggested creating a dedicated organization to support victims, noting that only one officer was assigned to all 21 non-police victims' families. To prevent similar tragedies, the report recommended stricter gun control measures. It also called for a nationalized and revamped Alert Ready system, which is currently privately operated, to make sure that the public is warned effectively and timely during emergencies. Do you think the Mass Casualty Commission was right? What do you think is the biggest reason why they could not prevent the attacks? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, thank you to Sarah for the suggestion to cover this case. If you have any cases you'd like me to cover, just comment below and let me know what it is. I read all the comments. If you want more videos like this, please be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime videos. Take care and see you in the next one.